Welcome to Reading with Nana, and hello to my returning friends. We're reading the novel Heidi, and the author is Johanna Spyri. The last time we were together, Heidi and her grandfather, uncle, who has a very bad reputation with the family and the people in the village that live below the mountain, had finally met. They seemed to have a really good day, much to our surprise when we think about the way he was described by everyone. We will continue today with Chapter 3 On the Pasture. Heidi was awakened early next morning by a loud whistle. Opening her eyes, she saw her little bed and the hay beside her bathed in golden sunlight. For a short while, she did not know where she was. But when she heard grandfather's deep voice outside, everything came back to her. She remembered how she had come up the mountain the day before, and how they had left old Ursula, who was always shivering with cold, and sat near the stove all day long. While Heidi lived with Ursula, she had always been obliged to stay indoors, where the old woman could see her. Because Ursula was deaf, she couldn't hear. She was afraid to let Heidi go outdoors, so the child had often fretted in that confined room, just sitting there, longing to run outside. Now she was thrilled to find herself in this new home, and she could hardly wait to see the goats again. Leaping out of bed, she put on her few things, and in a short time she was down the ladder and outside the hut. Peter was already there with his flock, waiting for Schwanli and Barley, which the grandfather had brought over to join the other goats. "Do you want to go with him to the pasture?" asked the grandfather. "Oh, yes," cried Heidi, clapping her hands. "Go now and wash yourself first, for the son will laugh at you if he sees how dirty you are. Everything is ready for you there," he added, pointing to a large tub of water sitting there in the sun. Heidi did as she was told and washed and rubbed herself till her cheeks were glowing. In the meanwhile, the grandfather called to Peter to come into the hut and to bring his bag along. The boy followed the old man, who commanded him to open the bag in which he carried his meager dinner. The grandfather added to the bag a piece of bread and a slice of cheese, both of which were at least twice as large as the portions the boy had packed. "The little bowl goes in there too," said the uncle, "for the child does not know how to drink straight from the goat, the way you do." "She's going to stay with you all day, so you must milk 2 bowls full for her dinner. Now look out that she does not fall over the rocks. Do you hear?" Just then Heidi came running in. "Grandfather, will the sun still laugh at me now?" she asked. The child had rubbed herself quite vigorously with a coarse towel which grandfather had put beside the tub, so that her face, her neck, and her arms were as red as lobster. With a faint smile, the grandfather said, "Nope, he won't laugh any more now. But when you come home tonight, you must swim in the tub like a fish. When one goes about like the goats, one will have dirty feet. Now be off." With that, the troop started merrily up the Alp, the big mountain. A cloudless, deep blue sky looked down over them, for the wind had driven away every little cloud in the night. The fresh green mountainside was bathed in brilliant sunlight, and many blue and yellow flowers had opened. Heidi was ecstatic with joy, and she ran hither and thither and to and fro across the field. In one place she saw big patches of fine red primroses, and in another spot blue gentians sparkled in the grass, and everywhere the golden rock roses were nodding to her. As she was soon lost in wonder over the abundance of treasures, Heidi forgot all about Peter and his goats. She ran far ahead of him and then strayed away off to one side and to another, for the sparkling flowers drew her from here to there. Picking large bunches of them to take home with her, she collected them all into her little apron. Peter was having a hard time following her, for his round little eyes could not move so quickly. The goats were behaving badly as well, and only by shouting and whistling and swinging his rod could he drive them together. Heidi, where are you now? He called in a rather angry tone. Over here, a voice sounded from somewhere. Peter could hardly see her, sitting on the ground behind that mound of entirely covered, fragrant flowers. The whole air was filled with their perfume, and the child drew it in long breaths. You must follow me now, Peter called out. The grandfather told me to look out for you, and you must not fall over the rocks. Where are the rocks? Asked Heidi without stirring from her perch. Way up there, and we still have a good way to go. If you come quickly, we may see the eagle up there and hear him shriek. Such a suggestion was tempting to Heidi's ears, and she came running to Peter with her apron full of flowers. Such a suggestion. Wow. You have enough flowers now, he declared. If you pick them all today, there won't be any left for tomorrow. Heidi had to agree. Besides, her apron was already full of them. From then on, she stayed at Peter's side as they continued their climb up the mountain. The goats, scenting the pungent herbs in the meadows, also hurried on without delay. Peter would usually take up his position for the day at the foot of a high cliff, which reached far up into the sky. Overhanging rocks on the one side offered some danger to the grazing animals, so the grandfather's warning to Peter was wise. After they had reached their destination, the boy took off his bag and placed it in a little hollow in the ground. The wind often blew in violent gusts over the mountainside, and Peter did not want to lose his precious pack. With that, he lay down in the sunny grass, for he was very tired. Heidi, taking off her apron, rolled it tightly in a bundle and put it beside Peter's bag. Then, sitting down beside the boy, she looked about her. Far down below, she saw the glistening valley. A large field of snow rose high in front of her. Heidi sat a long time without stirring, with Peter asleep by her side and the goats wandering about between the bushes. A light breeze fanned her cheek, and those big mountains made her feel happier than she had ever been before. She looked up the mountain tops until she could see their faces, and soon each of them became familiar to her, like old friends. Suddenly, she heard a loud, sharp scream, and looking up, beheld the largest bird she had ever seen flying above her. With outspread wings, he flew in wide circles over Heidi's head. Wake up, Peter! Wake up, Heidi called. Look up, Peter, and see the eagle there. Peter woke up, and then they both watched the bird breathlessly. It rose higher and higher into the azure sky until it disappeared at last behind the mountain peak. Where has it gone? Heidi asked. Home to its nest, was Peter's answer. Oh, does it really live way up there? How wonderful that must be. But tell me why it screams so loud, Heidi inquired. Because it has to, Peter replied. Oh, let's climb up there and see its nest, implored Heidi. But Peter, with a note of decided disapproval in his voice, answered, oh dear, not even the goats could climb up there. Grandfather has told me not to let you fall down the rocks, so we cannot go. Peter now began to call loudly and to whistle, and soon all the goats were assembled on the green field. Heidi ran into their midst, for she loved to see them leaping and playing about. In the meantime, Peter was preparing dinner for Heidi and himself. He placed her large pieces of bread and cheese on one side and his own small pieces on the other side. Then he milked barley and put the full bowl in the middle. When he was ready, he called to the little girl, but she did not come right away. Stop jumping around now and sit down, said Peter. Your dinner is ready. Is this milk for me? She inquired. Yes, it is. Those large pieces also belong to you. When you are through with the milk, I shall get you some more. After that, I'll get mine. What milk do you get? Heidi inquired. I get it from my own goat, that speckled one over there. But go ahead and eat, Peter instructed her at once. Heidi obeyed, and when the bowl was empty, he filled it again. Breaking off a piece of bread for herself, she gave Peter the rest, a portion still bigger than his own portion had been. Then she handed him the whole slice of cheese and said, "You can eat that. I have had enough." Peter was speechless with surprise, for would it have been impossible for him ever to give up any of his share? He even hesitated to take her food until she laid it in his lap. It was at that point when he realized she really meant to give him this wonderful gift. He gave her a nod of thanks and then proceeded to eat the most sumptuous meal of his life. Heidi just sat there watching the goats and asking Peter for their names. The boy could tell them all to her, for that was about the only thing he had to carry in his head. She soon had them all memorized as well. One of them was Big Turk, who would try to stick his big horns into all the others. Most of the goats ran away from their rough and tumble comrade. Only the brave and bold Thistlefinch was not afraid, and after running his horns 3 or 4 times into the other, the Big Turk gave up fighting with him. For Thistlefinch had sharp horns and met him in the most warlike attitude. A small white goat called Snowhopper kept up her bleating in the most piteous manner, which induced Heidi to console her over and over again. At last, Heidi went up to the little goat and throwing her arms around its head, she asked, "What is the matter with you, Snowhopper? Why do you always cry for help?" The little goat then pressed close to Heidi's side and became perfectly quiet. Peter was still eating, but between bites he called to Heidi. "She is unhappy because the old goat has left us. She was sold to somebody in Mayenfeld 2 days ago." Who was the old goat? Her mother, of course. Where is her grandmother? She hasn't any. And her grandfather? She hasn't any grandfather either. "Poor little Snowhopper," said Heidi, drawing the little creature tenderly to her. "Don't grieve any more. See, I am coming up here with you every day now, and if there is anything the matter, you can come to me." Snowhopper rubbed her head against Heidi's shoulder and stopped bleating, which is the noise that goats make. When Peter had finally finished his dinner, he joined Heidi. The little girl had just noticed that Schwanley and Barley were by far the cleanest and prettiest of all the goats. They evaded the obnoxious Turk with a sort of contempt, and they always managed to find the greenest bushes for themselves. She mentioned it to Peter, who replied, "I know. Of course they are the prettiest, because the uncle washes them and gives them salt. He has the best and cleanest stable by far." All of a sudden, Peter, who had been lying on the ground, leaped to his feet and bounded after the goats. Heidi followed him over towards a dangerous abyss on the side. Peter had noticed how the adventurous Thistlefinch had gone nearer and nearer to the dangerous ledge. Just in the nick of time, Peter was able to keep the goat from falling over the edge of the cliff. In his rush, Peter stumbled over a stone, and he was only able to catch the goat by one leg. This enraged Thistlefinch, who was bleating furiously at the boy. Unable to get up, Peter loudly called for help. Seeing Peter holding on desperately to Thistlefinch's leg, Heidi quickly picked up some fragrant herbs and held them under the animal's nose. Soothingly, she said, "Come, come, Thistlefinch, and be sensible. Come, Thistlefinch, and be sensible. You might fall down there and break your leg. That would hurt you horribly." The goat turned about and quickly devoured the herbs that Heidi had in her hand. When Peter had returned to his feet, he led the runaway to the herd with a little help from Heidi. When he had the goat back safely, he raised his rod to beat it as punishment for his misdeed. The goat cowered in fear as if he knew it was coming. Heidi screamed loudly, "Peter! No, do not beat him. Look how scared he is." "He well deserves it," snarled Peter, still preparing to strike. But Heidi seized his arm and shouted indignantly, "You mustn't hurt him. Let him go." Heidi's eyes looked intently and determinedly at the boy. Sensing her commanding demeanor, Peter desisted and dropped the rod. "I'll let him go if you give me a piece of your cheese again tomorrow," he said, for he wanted some compensation for his ordeal with this goat. "You may have all of it tomorrow and every day because I don't need it," Heidi assured him. "I shall also give you a big piece of bread if you promise never to beat any of the goats." "I don't care," growled Peter, offering Heidi a promise of sorts. Thus the day had passed, and the sun was already sinking down behind the mountains. Sitting on the grass, Heidi looked at the bluebells and the wild roses glowing in the last rays of the sun. The mountain peaks were also glowing, and Heidi suddenly called out to the boy, "Oh, Peter, look! Everything is on fire. The mountains are burning, and the sky too. Oh, look! The moon was over there is on fire too. Do you see the mountains all in a glow? Oh, how beautiful the snow looks. Peter, the eagle's nest must surely be on fire too. Oh, look at the fir trees over there." Peter was quietly peeling his rod and looking up. He said to Heidi, "This is no fire. It only looks like that." "But what is it then?" asked Heidi eagerly, gazing about her everywhere. "It becomes this way of itself," explained Peter. "Oh, look, everything is all rosy now. Oh, look at that mountain over there with the snow and the sharp peaks. What is its name?" "The mountains have no names," he answered sullenly. "Oh, see the beauty of it. Oh, it looks as if many, many roses were growing on those cliffs. Oh, now everything is turning gray. Oh dear, the fire has gone out and it is all over. What a terrible shame," said Heidi quite despondently. "It will be the same again tomorrow," Peter reassured her. "Come now, we have to go home." What was that Heidi saw with all those mountains burning and the rosy colors and then the grayness? As soon as Peter called the goats together, they started down the mountain. "Will it be like that every day when we come up here?" asked Heidi eagerly. "It usually is," was the reply. "What about tomorrow?" she inquired. "Tomorrow it will be like it was today, I am sure," Peter affirmed. That made Heidi feel happy once again. She walked quietly by Peter's side, thinking over all the new things she had seen. At last, as they came upon the hut, they found the grandfather waiting for them on a bench under the fir trees. Heidi ran up to him with two goats following along, for they knew their master. Peter called to her, "Come again tomorrow. Good night." Heidi gave him her hand, assuring him that she would come along. Finding herself surrounded by the goats, she gave Snowhopper one last hug. Then, as Peter disappeared down the path, Heidi returned to her grandfather. "Oh, grandfather, oh, grandfather, it was so beautiful. I saw the fire and the roses on the rocks, and see the many, many flowers I have brought you." With that, Heidi shook the flowers out of her apron. But oh, how miserable they looked. Heidi did not even recognize them as the flowers she had picked on the mountain. "What is the matter with them, grandfather? They looked so different before," Heidi exclaimed in her fright. "They are made to bloom in the sun, not to be shut up in an apron," said grandfather. "Then I shall never pick them any more. Please, grandfather, tell me why the eagle screeches so loudly," asked Heidi. "First, go and take a bath, and I will go into the shed to get your milk. Afterwards, we'll go inside together, and I'll tell you all about it over supper." After supper, Heidi sat at the table on her tall chair before her milk, and she asked grandfather the same question about the eagle. "He is sneering down at the people below, who sit in the villages and make each other angry. He calls down to them, "If you would come away to live up on the heights like me, you would feel much better." The grandfather spoke these last words with such a wild sounding voice that it reminded Heidi of the eagle's screech. "Why don't the mountains have names, grandfather?" asked Heidi. "They all have names, and if you describe their shapes for me, I can name them for you." Heidi described several, and the old man gave her each of the names. The child told him now about everything that happened throughout the day, and especially about the wonderful fire on the mountain. She asked how it came about. "The sun does it," he exclaimed. "He says, 'Good night' to the mountains. He throws his most beautiful rays over them so that they may not forget him until he returns in the morning." Heidi was so very pleased with this explanation that she could hardly wait to see the sun's good night greetings repeated the next day. But it was time to go to bed now. Heidi slept soundly all night. She dreamt of the little snowhopper bounding happily about on the glowing mountains amidst the many glistening roses blooming all around. And that is the end of our story for today. And that is how Heidi's day ends. Day 2 with the grandfather. Click like or subscribe. I hope you're enjoying this novel, Heidi by Johanna Spiri. Until next time.